Hey, Mike Swenson here with the Elite Advantage team. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, hey, I own a home, so does that mean I need to look at buying a home first, or should I list my existing home first? So in this video, we're going to cover a lot of the important things that you need to consider because the answer is different for each person. So stay tuned to this video and check it out. So today we're talking about, should I sell my home first or should I look at buying a home first? And the answer to that question is actually, it depends. Everybody's in a different situation, so those circumstances are different for each person. What might be right for somebody else, your best friend, your neighbor, may not be right for you. And so these are the things that we should look at when answering that question. So first thing we want to look at is time frame. When you're looking to sell your home, when does that need to happen and why does that need to happen? For the buy side, when does that need to happen and why does it need to happen? You know, one of the questions that we need to ask is, if you're faced with the difficult decision of owning 2 homes versus owning 0 homes, which would be your preferred or least preferred option? And from there, we'll really continue the conversation and look at that. But that's the reality of what can happen is you could either own 2 or you could own 0, or we find a way to make that work. The other thing that we need to consider is financing. What do you qualify for? For some people, you may not be able to qualify for owning 2 homes. So if you only can qualify for the 1 home, then the 2 home isn't an option, and we have to figure out a timeline that works for you. So let's first take a look at the buy side. So on the buy side, what are you looking to do? Are you going to stay in the area? Are you going to move out of the area? Are you moving up to a higher priced home? Are you downsizing? How much equity do you currently have in your home that you could potentially tap for a down payment on your next home? So those are some of the things that we want to consider. And then we're going to walk through some of those financial implications and what that means. If you are really stretching to a much larger, nicer home, the idea of 2 mortgage payments may not be as attractive for you. So those are the things that you're going to want to consider. If we're looking at the sell side, we want to look at the timing of that. It depends on your existing home. If you have a home that is a nice starter home for a lot of people in a desirable area at a desirable price point, the likelihood of selling your home quickly is very strong. If you have a home that's very unique and the buyer pool is much smaller, then we don't necessarily have as good of a handle on how quickly that home will sell. We're obviously optimistic that we can sell it quickly for you, and yet we don't know. So that's where we're going to want to take a look at your home and see and project out the saleability of that home and how quickly do we think that we can get it sold. Obviously, if you're in some luxury home and you're looking at downsizing, a higher priced home might sit on the market for longer than a lower priced home. So we're going to look at that option too. Now the nice thing is when we line those things up, if you don't really know where you sit on which one is the most desirable or least desirable option, and let's say you do qualify to be able to own 2 homes at once, there's some things in our favor that we can do to help you out. So one of them is we could possibly have a contingency on the purchase of your next home. So if somebody puts in an offer on buying your home, you can have a contingency that it's dependent on you buying your next home. And so as the seller, you're in the catbird seat. You have the control over what happens. If I'm going to sell my house to you and I want to make sure that I have found a home that I want, that can be a contingency. Now that is potentially an option that if you sit on that for too long, the buyer may want to look somewhere else, and yet that's a way to possibly buy a little bit more time. Another thing that you can do is you can push out the closing. So typically a closing might take 30, 45, 60 days. If we wanted to, we could push it out to 90 days. Obviously the buyer would need to accept that, but that's an option to buy you a little bit more time. The other thing that we can do is we can look for some transitional housing, whether it's an apartment to rent or friends or family or somebody to rent in the short term or to live with in the short term. We can look at those short-term housing solutions for you to possibly bridge the gap. Another thing that we can look at for you is a possible rent back. So we can have a house that closes, and that doesn't mean that the possession needs to necessarily change hands. So we could have the buyers close on your home, and depending on their situation, you can actually rent from them and still live in your existing house and pay them rent until you're ready to make your move. And then that means they have a more flexible timeline of getting into your home. If they're thinking about being in your home for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and the ability for them to get the home that they love means that they may have to wait 2 months and extend maybe potentially a lease on their maybe an apartment. Maybe they're leasing for another 2 months so that you can live in your home for 2 months to find the house of your dreams. They might be willing to do that. So we can have some sort of rent back. We can delay the closing. You move out of your house. The new buyers move into your house and they pay you rent before it closes. And so they're essentially renting and they'll eventually own it. So there's some flexibility on that timeline too. So it depends on the buyer's situation. And like I said, when you're the seller of the house, you have the ability to potentially dictate more of those terms and what's going to be a good fit for you. So that depends on a flexible buyer situation. That hopefully provides some good information for you guys on some different things to consider. And obviously it's different for every situation. So the best way to get a strong answer is to reach out to us. Let's start that conversation. Let's lay out the different scenarios. And then we're obviously going to look at the financial implications and have you talk to a lender potentially about what that looks like for your next home too. So reach out to us. We're happy to start that discussion with you and look at how we can make that work for you in a way that fits your lifestyle. So thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate it.